We had some weird technical troubles earlier today. Hopefully, this live will get out now. Um, so, I'm actually going to go over what I went over this morning and give you a quick update. Basically, this morning, what I was talking to you guys about is the very high probability that at some point in the future, we are going to see a price of $100 million per Bitcoin, which would be $1 per Satoshi. And I know you can say, how can you say that? That sounds nuts. It's ludicrous. I'll remind you, when Bitcoin first started, it was free. $0 per Bitcoin, 0 cents per Bitcoin. You could get 100 million Satoshis for $0 and 0 cents. Right? It was before it was traded on exchanges, when we were just mining it and bartering it amongst miners and other people who were interested in it and were willing to exchange some Bitcoins for some content or some hardware, small computer fans, things like that, or computer work, all kinds of stuff. And there were some people that I was exchanging with in the very early days, just not on exchanges, just directly. And there were obviously miners, like me and other miners. I've since stopped mining for many reasons. I've explained them many times. But back then, again, Bitcoin was free, right? Basically, there was still only 21 million of them, even from the very beginning, and we were just starting to mine them, and so the cost back then was 100 million Satoshis for nothing. And even when it went on exchanges and reached a price of $1, okay, back then, at $1, you were getting 100 million Satoshis for $1. You're getting a Bitcoin for $1, right? Barely, most people didn't even think about how many Satoshis it is. It was just paying $1, getting a Bitcoin. And they were buying, dozens of them or hundreds of them at a time, some thousands, right? Fortunate enough, obviously, to buy many thousands and hold on to them is doing very well now. Right? They are the whales that are selling off chunks of their Bitcoins now to banks, ETFs, financial institutions, other huge whales who want to get in on it. They're the ones who are riding that gravy train of the 12 billion% plus profits since the asset launched in like 15 years. Right? Insane gains. Well, since that time, Bitcoin having gone from 100 million Satoshis for $1, let's say, right? Or even from 0 cents, but from $1, the price at the all-time high was something like 1,400 Satoshis for $1. So a very high increase in value per Satoshi, right? You could get 100 million for $1. Now you can get, 1,400 for $1. Today it's like 1,500 and something for $1, because the price obviously went down a little bit since the all-time high, but not significantly. So it's still pretty high, right? Like, even if the price falls to half of what it is now, it's still going to be like only 3,000 Satoshis for $1 when you compare that to 100 million for $1 15 years ago. But the thing is, it's going to keep approaching 1 Satoshi per $1 for the foreseeable future, as long as long term the price continues to rise, as it has been doing over the past 15 years. Right? Now, what could stop that from happening? Obviously, if people stop using the network completely, if people stop using Bitcoin completely. But who would stop using it completely if they have their wealth stored in it and they want more of it? Or if people don't have their wealth stored of it, but they want more of it? And if all the banks continue to use it, now all the banks suddenly decide, and all the financial institutions suddenly decide, and all the ETFs suddenly decide, and all the governments suddenly decide, it's a fad. We've invested hundreds of billions in this thing, but we don't want it anymore. It's not likely to happen, right? They don't put their eggs into a basket if they don't think it's going to be a long-lasting thing. These are risk-averse organizations, and they're not looking for, the next thing to make 3 months worth of a profit out of, right? They're looking for things that they can rely on for years, if not decades. And not just 5 or 10 years, but like many years, if not many decades. And they see that this thing is the future of the transfer of values. Right? They see that basically this is how people are going to be transferring values for the foreseeable future. So the solution for many of them is to acquire as much as they possibly can in order to control as much of the future finances as they possibly can. Right? Therefore, the network will not just suddenly completely lose all value and stay there. Even if somebody comes in and dumps, 1 million Bitcoin onto the market, okay, and just to crash the price and make it last as long as possible, what do you think is going to happen if the price goes down to zero, $100 or $1,000? What do you think is going to happen? People are going to buy it like crazy. Whoever can get their hands on, Bitcoin, they see the price so low, they're not going to panic and sell everything. They're going to buy like crazy. Why? Because an asset that's worth $74,000 now, 65, whatever, between 60 and 75,000 bucks, isn't suddenly going to lose all value unless the actual network is going to die for some reason and people are going to stop using it for some reason, which there's zero indication that that would be the case at the moment. Now, is it possible something could come and replace Bitcoin in the future? Yes. And is it likely to hit $100 million price for Bitcoin in the next 5 to 10 years? No, it's not. What would be the target date? Well, I'm talking decades. Could be 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. I don't know. Maybe longer. Doesn't really matter to me. As a trader, I really don't care. Price is totally moot. Right, so the target date, whenever you see target dates for crazy numbers, a $250,000 Bitcoin, a $500,000 Bitcoin, $1 million Bitcoin, $8 million Bitcoin, it's all ridiculous to put dates on them. Okay. We can look into the future with the VEPs and have extremely high accuracy. But even with that, when you're looking super long term into the future, the probabilities, like the ranges of probability from the upside to the downside, are staggeringly huge, especially when you're talking about, on the upside, $100 million, right? Like, those are enormous numbers for an asset, but they're not really enormous numbers for an asset that actually has a credible mathematical way to get to that number. And you can say that's ridiculous. How can an asset ever get to $100 million per unit? Again, that's $100 million per Bitcoin, which would only be $1 per Satoshi. And long before that happens, expect that people will be, because they already are, buying and selling Satoshis. They're not buying whole Bitcoins. I mean, yes, whales are. Organizations that have a lot of money are, but individuals are not buying whole Bitcoins. Only people with significant amounts of money to spend are doing that, right? Traders are earning them and then losing them for the most part. And they're usually losing them to whales who have a lot more. It's just the nature of the business. But how, you could say, well, how can you say it can get to 100 million? Again, it's already gone from 100 million Satoshis for $1 or for free to 1,500 and even 1,300 Satoshis for $1. It's only got to go another 100, like 1,300 increase. How does it do that? Well, think about it this way. If the price 10x's from here, that'll be 650 grand. And then it'll be about 140 cents per buck. Right? And that's just if it 10x's. And that will probably happen in the next 5 years, maybe 10. Right? With all probabilities, if you look at it, there's a very high probability we'll see, middle 5 figures, upper middle 5 figures, even within the next 5 to 10 years. That is entirely probable. Will it happen for sure? No, nothing will happen for sure. But are the probabilities high? Yes. the probabilities are high. The volatility will remain in place in Bitcoin for a good number of years to come, probably decades. Okay, even with mining dropping, that's only going to increase their value. There's going to be less and less available new supply, and people are going to rely on it more and more. So there's going to be more and more demand, therefore the price will keep going up. Okay, that's basic economics, law of supply and demand. So if the price goes up 10x and it goes down to 130, 140 sats per Bitcoin, then it's only got to do that again, right? It's only got to go from 140 down to 1. Price doesn't have to go up 140 times, right? From there, once it's at 650K per Bitcoin, right? $650,000 per Bitcoin. In order to get to $1 per Satoshi, it's $100 million. So all it has to do is then go from 650, breach over. Once you're already past $1 million Bitcoin, then we're talking, 1%, right? So at that point, we'll be looking basically, right now, again, 1,300, 130. We'll be looking at 100 Satoshis per dollar when it breaches the $1 million mark. And then all it's got to do is another 100x. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but again, if this becomes anything even close to a world reserve currency, right? If it just becomes an alternative reserve currency, and if you consider fiat as fading fast and they're all dying, all the fiats of the world are being roundly rejected more and more by people who don't want anything to do with them. And yes, it's still a relatively small number, but it is a growing number over the years. People are using Bitcoin and crypto more and more. People are using fiat less and less. The net result is 8 billion people are not going to be sustained by fiats that are fading fast, even if they get replaced by other fiats. Okay, fiats may be necessary to maintain something like a government structure, taxes, whatever, revenue for the government. That's how they view it, right? That may be necessary to maintain things like inflation and interest rates, which are levers that the government plays with in order to remain able to operate, right? There's population growth and everything else. So instead of just investing more and making more cryptos, sustainable, they're going to focus on the big gorilla that they can make the most money on. Then next, they're going to focus on the next gorilla, which is ETH. Then next, they're going to focus on probably XRP. Maybe eventually they get to Litecoin. Who knows, right? Solana, who knows? Whatever they're going to do. Probably not Solana because it's venture backed, but we'll see. But XRP is also venture backed, right? Created by Ripple Labs. So if they get an ETF, why shouldn't Solana? To be honest, there's really no difference. The difference is, of course, that XRP has been making, Ripple has been making inroads with banks and international organizations, international financial organizations for many years for the purpose of being basically the bankster's best friend in order to help them continue to rip people off with bank transfer fees while at the same time paying practically nothing while using actually XRP for the actual transactions. And so they'll continue charging people $25 or more to send money from bank account to bank account when it costs the bank actually like 0.00001 cents, right? And they're going to keep more profit basically because they think that that's going to keep them sustainable in the future. Of course, hello, I have news for you, banks. right? Like people who use crypto are going to use banks less and less. And yes, there's still billions of people who rely on banks, but they're also going to figure out that the game is up, the jig is up, the rig is up. And if you want to keep those customers, you're going to have to start letting them pay reduced fees, significantly reduced fees, like basically nothing, right? Charge them $1 a month for all the transactions that they might do instead of $25 per transaction, or thousands or millions, depending on how much money they're spending. And let them have free, unfettered access to their actual funds. Right? All these things are things that crypto challenges about the old world, which is why the old world first ignored it, and then B, the old world laughed at it, and then C, the old world tried to fight it, and now D, the old world has surrendered and realizes that crypto has won, and that is why they're trying to get their grubby little hands all over it as quickly as they can, because they know, point blank, that much like the flowers of spring and early summer, this is the time to be getting into a new asset class that is highly volatile and has a very good rate of return. Doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin or something else, as long as it has a really good rate of return. They want that. How are they going to get that? Well, they're going to pay for it. They're going to pay premium, and they're going to be happy to have paid that premium. Right? The question is whether or not you, as a retail investor, will have acquired enough to sustain yourself through the revolution, essentially the financial revolution that is ongoing, to make sure you get to the other side with a big enough stack to sustain yourself for your lifetime and hopefully hand off some nice amount to your heirs, and giving them the tools and the knowledge so that they can continue on their path in this new world, where probably we won't see anything like this ever again in our lifetimes, and neither will our children or grandchildren or great grandchildren or great great grandchildren or great 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 grandchildren. Right? This is the kind of thing that happens literally at most once every few centuries, and it's never happened like this, with all the computers and digital power and public ledgers and security and mobility, portability, immutability, uncensorability, all that stuff, right? And divisibility, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Like, we are talking about the entire system is changing. So $100 million Bitcoin is frankly an afterthought to the fact that the whole system is changing. Because remember, $100 million, let's say it happens 50 years from now. $100 million, if you're around or if your children are around or whatever, or your grandchildren, 100 million bucks is not going to be what $100 million is today. Like, not even close, right? It'll be maybe like what 10 million bucks is today in 50 years time, or maybe in 30 years time it'll be like what 20 million is today. Why? Well, because the dollar's already plummeted 99.99% since it was launched in 1913 or so, when they originally depegged the US dollar from actual gold, right? And since 1971, it's fallen, more than half of that when they depegged from paper gold. And in the last 15 years, it's fallen 99.99% against Bitcoin. Right? I mean, even more, right? You think about it, it's gone from 100 million Satoshis per dollar to about 1,400, 1,300 Satoshis per dollar right now. That's more than 99.99%. And in the last 10 years, it's already fallen more than 99.9%. So the odds of the dollar falling further, another percent against Bitcoin are pretty damn high, I would say, and falling, further until the point where $100 million Bitcoin is will not be very different than when it hits $10 million in the coming probably decade or two. Like, don't be surprised if 20 years from now Bitcoin is at $10 million. Is what I'm saying. Now, again, does it have to happen? No, nothing has to happen in this world. Practically nothing. There are many things that seem like they have to happen, but many things, especially in liquid markets, don't necessarily have to happen. Are the probabilities high that it will happen? Yes, the probabilities are actually extremely high that it will happen. You know, does it mean it will definitely happen? No, again, it does not mean it will definitely happen. Is there a probability that it will stay roughly between where it is now and say 100,000 or a quarter million and never go beyond that? Yeah, that also is a probability. It's a highly unlikely probability that it will just stay and never go beyond that. And it's also highly unlikely that it will just go to zero. Right? The probabilities, if you look at the actual VEPs, if you look at the actual VEPs over time, you'll see it's on a trajectory. And you could say it's power law or whatever. I'm just looking at the VEPs as the most important indicator. And yes, adoption rates matter. Network power matters, hash power matters, all that stuff matters, right? Limited supply matters, high demand matters. These things are all in effect. The game is already on. It's a rush to buy as much as you can right now. Right now, there aren't even a million coins. I've mentioned this many times already. There aren't even a million coins available on exchanges. Out of the 19.7 million coins in the hands of people who own them, right, scattered across 50 million or 250 million wallets or whatever it is, out of those 19.7 million, there's only 970,000 even available at last count. So it's probably even like 950,000 by now that are even available on exchanges. Think about that. Could it get to zero available? It could, but very likely people will put some coins on the exchange to sell them. Right? They'll offer liquidity. They'll sell their bitcoins. They'll at a premium or whatever price they can get. Sell them at market rates. Doesn't matter because people got to pay bills. So there'll always be some available. But are there going to be millions and millions of coins available? Very unlikely. We are well beyond that. So if there's many millions of people who want these things, and there's less than a million of them available, what do you think's going to happen to the price? Right? What do you think the returns are going to do? Are they going to go drop to zero, or do you think they're going to rise and the price is going to follow? Yeah, if you know about trading the VEPs, the returns determine what the price action does, right? Because the returns move away from the mean, and the returns mean revert. The price action just follows. So if the price action starts running up, it's because it's following the returns up. If it's just continuously running on, and if it's falling all the time, it's because the returns are falling. And right now, we've seen an insane amount of great rates of return for Bitcoin over the past 15 years. And again, by all the indications we see with the probabilities, that is going to continue to the point where we see at least, we're going to get to 100 million per Bitcoin. And then people are going to say, wow, that's crazy. That's too high. And then it's going to go to 110 million per Bitcoin, 120, who knows what. You're going to be getting more than $1 for every Satoshi you have. Right? Or you're going to be paying less than $1 per, per Satoshi. You're going to be, sorry. Yeah, you're going to be paying more than $1 for every Satoshi you want. Or you'll be paying less than one Satoshi for every dollar you want. That will happen, very likely, is my estimate about the future. Again, it's a long-term future. Could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. It doesn't really matter. What matters is it shows you the indication that this thing is a long-term investment beast. And people are going to be buying and selling and talking about Satoshis as a currency, not Bitcoin. People who own Bitcoin, whole Bitcoins, are going to be like legendary. Oh, wow. I knew that guy, he had a whole Bitcoin. I knew that guy, he had 10 Bitcoin. I knew that guy, he had 100,000 Bitcoin. Legends will be told about these people who will be the world's first trillionaires. and possibly more. And I don't mean companies, I mean individuals, right? I mean, think about it. If you have $100 million Bitcoin and you got 10 Bitcoin, you're already a billionaire. What if you have 1,000 of them? You're a trillionaire. So there's a lot of people who have 1,000 or more Bitcoin. Um, Again, I don't think it's a short-term thing. It's not going to happen overnight. Don't lose sleep over it. Like, really, don't lose sleep over it. It shouldn't affect your trading at all. But long term, you got to realize that the trajectory of this thing is not just up. It's up for a very sustained long time because it's the future of the transfer of values, right? It just so happens that there's a unit called Bitcoin, which is an aggregate of 100 million Satoshis. So really the question is, when does one Satoshi equal $1? That's really the question. It's not, is it $100 million Bitcoin? That will be $100 million Bitcoin. But the question is, when will one Satoshi equal $1? And honestly, at just 1,400 left to go, that could happen anytime. I don't expect it to happen for decades, but that could happen anytime. It's not that insane to think. Once this thing pops over 100 grand and 250 grand and 500,000 and it breaks a million, you know, depending on how it does it, or over what period of time and everything else, or what period of adoption, you know, at some point when the masses are actually using it, not just people who are the very few percentage of people in the world who actually invest in the stock market and buy ETFs and things, which is less than 10% of the population. But once you've got 20, 30, 40, 50% of the population using crypto, it is very easy to see these prices explode because they won't just be used here and there. Once they're used by more than half the population, that will be the default currencies of the world because they're faster, they're more convenient, they cost less, et cetera, et cetera. Secure, portable, all these things. Once that happens, it's anybody's guess in terms of how fast it can run up in value. But the chances are that we won't even get to that $100 million Bitcoin until, sorry, we won't get to that 50% user base until we've already hit the 100 million. Is really the probability, because that's what will make people chase it like crazy and be ecstatic that they get to buy, you know, 10,000 satoshis for $10,000. That's when you'll see, quote unquote, panic in the street, if you will, people like, you know, FOMOing in like crazy and crying that they didn't buy now when they could still get 1,500 for a buck, which means that every dollar they put in now could be worth, you know, a week or a month of salary or a few days of salary in the future for every dollar they put in now. Could be worth like days of salary or a week of salary in the future. Now, of course, if you bought 5, 10 years ago, when I was banging away telling people, "Hey, why don't you get some Bitcoin?" Then you would have gotten millions and millions for every dollar of satoshis. You would have gotten millions of satoshis for every dollar, and you know you're set in theory. Even if dollar depreciates like crazy, you had, you know, hundreds of millions. If you had many Bitcoins, you'd be set. Technically, you'd already be set right now, but definitely in the future you'll be set. Anyway, that's my thoughts, my opinions. It's just, you know, what I think is the long-term trajectory of Bitcoin is it looks incredibly good based on sound money concepts, right? Based on reasonable, well-reasoned thoughts and understanding of how the economy works, how finances work, how money works, how crypto works, how all these things evolve. And it makes a lot of sense that we're going to see what seem now like insane prices. Remember, we are now at prices that people thought were insane 10 years ago. So happy Bitcoining, folks. See ya.